Welcome to the second webinar on notification. This is the second webinar that we have organized on notification. Today we will have a different dynamic that I will be explaining in a few minutes. I'm Erica Calderon. I work for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, AICA, and I would like to mention, as with every webinar, that this is an interagency initiative which is under the umbrella of GFTATS. This is an initiative focusing on training, preparation, and prevention, as well as response to African swine fever and other transboundary diseases. We are an interagency group made up of international organizations, as well as sub-regional and regional organizations such as the FAO, the WOAH, CAFSA, CARIVET, OIRSA, CAN, the CVP, COPEC, the USDA, and ICA. Today, we have a very different dynamic, like I said before, because we will be having a round of questions and answers. We will have one country representing each country in the hemisphere. So there will be some pre-established questions that have been checked by the interagency group. And then we will have a timer. You will see a timer on the screen indicating the time that each country has to respond to those questions. These webinars are being broadcasted via social media in Portuguese, in French, in English, and in Spanish. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that all the questions made on this webinar will be done using the chat function. So we will see how much time we have at the end for any other questions that there may be for each country specifically. If we do not have enough time to ask all the questions, or if we do not have enough time to maybe ask any questions at all at the end, then in that case, please still place them on the chat because we will take note of them and then we will rechannel them to each corresponding expert in the countries. Today, we will have the moderation of Rocio Campuzano. Together with me, we will be moderating the panel. She works for ICA in Mexico. She will be facilitating the questions along with me, and we will take turns for these questions as well. Today, we also have with us as panelists, we have Dr. Wendy Gonzalez. She is from the official veterinary service of the Dominican Republic. Just to give you some background information on her, she is a veterinarian and she specializes in epidemiology from the ISA University in the Dominican Republic and also from Iowa State University in the United States. She has worked in the Division of Surveillance, of Epidemiological Surveillance since 2008 of the Official Livestock Office, where she has collaborated in different national and international projects related to swine diseases like CSF, ASF, and others. We will also have Christian Zambrano. He's from the Official Veterinary Service of Ecuador. Christian is an agricultural engineer and he works in agroquality. He has worked on that for 10 years as a district director in Pichincha and also responsible for the project to eradicate foot and mouth disease and coordinator of animal health. We will also have the intervention of Daniela Pacheco de la Cerda. She is from the Official Veterinary Service of Brazil. She has a degree in veterinary medicine and has a master's in animal health from Brasilia. She has worked as an auditor for agriculture and livestock since 2017, and she currently coordinates the epidemiology department in the animal health section. She has experience in veterinary epidemiology and in the implementation of information systems in animal health. We will also have with us Tom Smiley. He is from the official veterinary service of Canada. Tom has worked on this for more than 30 years and focusing on dairy production. He spent more than 13 years in the Canadian Agency of Food Inspection and basically focusing on the notification of foot and mouth disease. Currently, he's the chief veterinarian of the CBO, and he is also a delegate of WOAH. He, from Canada, directs the technical group for the vaccination bank against foot and mouth disease in North America and is also member of the ad hoc committees of the WOAH on foot and mouth disease since 2016, 2017, and 2018. Finally, we have Dr. Rafael Rodriguez, who is the Chief of Veterinary Services of Honduras. But today he couldn't come. In replacement of Dr. Rodriguez, we will have Dr. Josue Gomez Lemus. Dr. Josue is a veterinary doctor and provides services in the public sector with respect to epidemiological surveillance and disease control. He focuses broadly on issues of animal health and antimicrobial resistance. Furthermore, he provides technical assistance in the private sector when dealing with clinical emergencies and for production and also company animals. So these are our panelists today by country. So without further ado, and as with every webinar, I do invite you to use the chat also to indicate what institution you're from and from what country. We really like to keep a record of those who join us in these training and webinars. Dr. Campuzano can kick off this section. We will start, as I said, with the questions. So a little more on the dynamic of this webinar. Every time we ask a question, you will see the timer on the screen, and that's just to let you know how long you have to respond. But do not stress out. Don't become stressed out. Do not leave any information out. You know, if we will try to keep it within that time, but of course, if there are a few seconds extra, it's fine. We don't want you to get all stressed out, but do try as much as possible to stay within that time, just so that we don't go overboard with the time of the webinar and it doesn't become too tedious for everyone. So let's begin with Dr. Zambrano from Ecuador. Go ahead, Rocio, you have the floor for the question. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Let's start with the first question then. Dr. Zambrano, what are the three main strengths of the national reporting system in your country? Which ones do you consider are these three main strengths? Go ahead. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you, Rocio, Erica, Wendy. I'm just Christian, yes, not Dr. Zambrano, not Engineer Zambrano, just call me Christian. So for the main strengths of Ecuador, I think we are within a process of eradicating classical swine fever. So this makes our epidemiological service quite sensitive. We have people who are vaccinating in the field, and when it's about CSF, we have a good epidemiological surveillance service in our country. As for ASF, we are within the cascade of diagnosis that is used for CSF. So every time we see a case of CSF, we always run the test for ASF. So we have quite a sensitive system. This is tied to the second strength, which is the services that are provided in the field. Like I said, we have brigades in the field, we have technicians doing supervision and addressing notifications for CSF. And with this diagnosis and with this diagnostic cascade, where one of the differentials is used for CSF, which is ASF, we do have a strengthened mechanism when it comes to notification that is the one for CSF, but that is used for ASF as well. Thank you very much. You did have some time, over and out. I'm within my time. Excellent. So let's take these seconds that were left, Rocio, for the next one. All right. One important thing that I wanted to mention before we go on, like I said before, and seriously, let's not get too stressed out and let's not rush it. Also for the interpreters, yes, you don't need to rush. It's important for them to be able to translate everything accurately. So let's move on to the next question. It's for Dr. Lemus from Honduras. The question is, what are the three main challenges in the national reporting system in your country? Thank you very much, Dr. Calderon. First of all, I would like to know if you can hear me well. Yes, we can. We can hear you just fine. So I believe that for the main challenges that we have in the notification system, one is the information that may not reach certain segments of the livestock producer, especially those who are in distant areas that are difficult to reach and where it's difficult to disseminate the information. That's, I think, one of the main challenges. But this is also associated to another aspect, which is the delay in the notifications by the producers to our regional offices when there is an event. And so we have that likely delay. So that's another challenge. We have improved the system significantly, but there are many challenges that we are working on. One of them is how to involve third parties. We have had certain success cases, but I think we can do more when it comes to involving, for example, professional centers or private associations, how to engage them on the specific issue of notification and reporting. So I think that's mostly an opportunity for improvement. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Lemus. Rocio, go ahead. Excellent. This question is for Tom Smiley from Canada. Which action or process allowed you to significantly improve your national reporting system? Dr. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question. I think in the recent avian influenza outbreak in Canada, we had some issues early on coordinating all the reports from different sectors. For example, the wild birds are usually controlled by wildlife services here. Some of the wild animals that were infected with avian influenza are normally handled by our wildlife services. And then there's the actual avian influenza in the birds, turkeys, and poultry that are handled through CFI. So coordinating all those three streams were a little bit difficult early on, but we did put together a dashboard in conjunction with Wildlife Services, and that dashboard was able to display all of the affected animals very quickly. We also put together a second dashboard that was shared between the different regions of the provinces in order to have just-in-time information on where the outbreaks were occurring, what stage they were at for depopulation. And so it was a very, very useful for senior management to have a look at quickly to see where they needed to provide resources and that kind of thing. So I think going forward, we're going to look at that a lot closer. One of the issues we've had in the past is that a lot of the reporting information is paper-based. Now all our staff have tablets, and it is going to be integrated into a new user database called Cadia, which is going to allow them in the field to input the information, and then that will automatically be uploaded as soon as they have cellular access to our national database so that managers can have a quick look at that. So I think that that's that was a test of our system right now, and we had to modify it to make it perform a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smiley. Erica? Thank you very much, Rocio. Let's go to Daniela. This is just the first section. So Dr. Campuzano will just introduce brief comments. Daniela, the question is the following. Please identify 3 lessons learned by veterinary services in the national reporting system. Good morning, good afternoon. In Brazil, it's already the afternoon. I would like to thank you very much. And let me point out the fact that currently there is a need to have clear definitions on the focus of the notification. This means that the diseases have to be considered, but with the perspective of each case, particularly when it comes to the mandatory notification. And the other 2 points or lessons learned have mostly to do with the fact that we need to digitalize the process. One of the last countries that were included in this process were able to implement a national system, and what we perceived with the implementation of that system was that it was necessary and important to keep records so that they could be shared with all of the authorities that were involved, all of the agencies, both state agencies and national agencies, in the full in the entire territory of the country. And also the need to simplify the registration, the notification process, how to deal with suspicions, how to deal with the full investigation of the case. So this was done with the perspective of optimizing the data and also promoting the analysis of the data both nationally and internationally. These are the main lessons that we learned in our veterinary services and which have improved our system as a whole. Thank you very much, Daniela. Rocio? Okay, the next question is for Wendy Gonzalez. She's joining us from the Dominican Republic. Doctor, good morning. The question is, what are the challenges facing the veterinary services for the timely international notification system? Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. The Dominican Republic, in order to do the timely notification on an international level for these type of events, first requires an analysis of our national surveillance system. we need to strengthen our surveillance system. And as a result, the notifications do not reach our offices in a timely manner. So it is much more difficult for us to become aware of what is happening and to be able to provide follow-up and also look for ways to do the international notification. Likewise, we do not have much collaboration from the productive sectors, and that is definitely one of the aspects that is more challenging now, or that actually affects the surveillance system, because without the collaboration of the productive sectors, we have no way of knowing what is happening in the farms and on the farms, and therefore we cannot provide the adequate follow-up. That comes hand in hand with the fact that we still do not have an awareness program for the population to have proper notifications. So we are lacking a good system, and we are trying to strengthen those programs so that we can first receive those notifications and then notify in turn these sanitary events in a timely manner. Thank you very much, Dr. Erica. Thank you very much, Rocio. Thank you, Wendy. So this is the first round of questions for all these specialists. So this involved a different question for each country, but now we will have the same question and each country will respond. The purpose of this webinar is actually to learn from the different approaches in how we approach the issue of notification. We are seeing that all countries are working on both their internal notification and also the international notification. It is worthwhile mentioning that there is great efforts from everyone, and examples of how Canada is dealing with this, as well as Brazil, Ecuador, and how we are trying to improve. So that is the purpose of today's webinar, for everybody to learn from the different approaches and how the countries are working on each of these aspects to improve. Rocio? Yes. One thing that sort of I kept thinking about is the fact that everyone mentioned the need to have all sectors involved. I think that all panelists referred to this in one way or another, and the need for transparency, right? It's so important. Like Tom said, also to have these dashboards available for everybody who is helping the official sector, and for people to know quickly what is happening, and have that information as updated as possible. So with avian influenza, it was unfortunately useful in many countries to detect these things. So, and in many cases, this led to an improvement, as has been mentioned. It sheds light on the needs for improvement that happen internally and externally as well. So I think we can move on to the next question. The next question is on technology. This is a topic that all countries can respond in order, please. So you can just request the floor by raising your hand, or we can just designate who is going to answer. Does your country have a reporting platform? Please indicate 3 advantages and 3 opportunities for improvement of your reporting or notification platform. So we can go maybe in the same order that we used for the start, right? So Christian, I think that's a good idea. Yes, let's do that. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. So for Ecuador, I think we have
muy globalizado, si así lo queremos decir, o las noticias llegan.
we have sort of, we have news and we have a global system, but notification from the producer to Agrocalidad has many communication channels. So we have email, for example. We also have phone lines, we have social media, and we also have an app that allows the farmers to send their notification. Once this happens, this information is uploaded to a system, called Zoosanitary Information System of Ecuador. And it has the forms to have the proper warning that these events have taken place and to do the follow-up for the event. What the status is, what the activity has been, what is the latest activity that has taken place, etc. So I believe that the advantage of having this sort of globalization of communication in general allows us to be, well, it just reveals how much we are in a position where information goes and comes and goes all the time. So producers have to sort of do away with that fear of notifying, yes, because sometimes because of the control measures, sometimes they're skeptical about notifying. So I think that we need to be more avant-garde and try to use all of those technological tools like artificial intelligence or business intelligence. All of those tools, I think, will allow us to have predictive models, and it will allow us to have more technological tools. Thank you. I thought your microphone was silent, but no, it's because you concluded your intervention. Yes, I just said over and out. Sorry. Thank you, Christian. And now for Dr. Lemus. Thank you. Thank you, Erica. Once again, can you hear me? Yes. We can hear you loud and clear. With respect to the use of technology and platforms, our surveillance system, from the point of view of notification, I think a couple of months ago, we did a review and considered the possibility of including this type of platform so that producers could notify the events. And we realized that there was one issue that has to do with our structure and with the reality of the sector. And it's the fact that for a producer to decide to notify, they find it easier to do it using other communication media. Maybe something that's more handy. For example, just picking up and calling on the phone or sending a WhatsApp message. So regardless of whether this is an outbreak of avian influenza, one lesson that we learned is that for producers, it was much easier just to have a phone number that they can call to notify instead of having to fill out as a first step an entire form in a platform. However, we have considered that maybe for the future, for certain segments, maybe with larger facilities, with more technology, it might be feasible to use a platform. However, how that data is analyzed and processed, that is handled in a platform. Yes, we do use platforms that are accessible, like Google Drive, for example. That's a very favorable tool. And there are other applications that we have been able to use for active epidemiological surveillance. But for notification, we feel that just providing a phone number appears to be like a more accessible method for producers to do it more quickly. Yes, that's a comment that I wanted to make. Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you very much. Under Canada's Health of Animals legislation, it is required that any producer or veterinarian or stakeholder would need to notify CFI for certain diseases. So Canada divides the diseases into reportable diseases, those diseases that cause significant economic issues such as ASF, FMD, classical swine fever, Newcastle's avian influenza, We also have diseases called immediately notifiable, where the labs are required to notify us immediately. And then we have annually notifiable, where the network of labs can advise us every year of those diseases that are circulating, that normally circulate endemically. From there, once they notify our regional offices, our CFA staff will need to get out of the office within an hour, especially for the reportable diseases, to launch an investigation. From there, the samples enter into our laboratory tracking system, and that has the capability of generating alerts to management to certain levels, depending on whether it's a low-risk submission or a high-risk submission. So we get notified very, very quickly. Some of the issues and challenges we have is that in the past, our system has been primarily a paper-based system. And so that can lead to issues when they're leaving the premise, coming back to the office, and now having to enter that data into the computers. So it causes some transcription errors. We don't have a centralized database for all the submissions that come in from the immediately notifiable and the annually notifiable. So our WOHAS focal point has to go through and collate all that data that she gets from different sources and submit to WOA every 6 months. But I think the new development that our staff are pursuing with this new CADIA program, which will be on everybody's tablets, will certainly help alleviate that. Will create that central database, and but it's been delayed because of our IT people have been working on the avian influenza outbreak and the development of the dashboards as well. So hopefully that will make progress soon, and we'll be in a much better place. Thank you.
Gracias, doctor. Tom.
Thank you, doctor.
Bueno, vamos con doctora Daniela. Adelante.
So we are going to have Dr. Daniela's presentation. As I said beforehand, instead of formatting this, we have a registration system, and we activate that with the current vet status, and any confirmation or new information is reported. So there is a surveillance service in Brazil, and we're able to use that system and activate an alert throughout the country. And there, all the notifications are centralized by the National Veterinarian Notification System. So the interpreter apologizes. The audio is not very easy to understand. The speaker needs a microphone. But within this context, we have our structure that's set, and other veterinarians are all updated on the information about alerts to WOA. So the idea was to format this to be able to provide a national notification system. And we also have a validation system to validate important data with indicators. And this provides a good opportunity for veterinarians to be linked on a national level throughout this database. And this allows different widespread access among vets, those that have a better understanding of the disease can also update information. So there's always opportunities for improvement. Although the system does have its shortcomings, the idea is for it to be updated because many times the user needs to be better informed as to how to improve or add information, and we need to make the system more interactive to make it easier to use. Now, we know that the system does have shortcomings with different diseases, treatment of diseases, outbreaks specifically. So we need to be able to specify the differences among the outbreaks, the diseases that arise, and we need to work on improving that.
Por favor, porque
we need you to speak a bit louder, doctor. If you could get closer to your microphone, perhaps use earphones. Can you hear me? We can hear you.
Yo creo que se escuchó bien la respuesta. Sin embargo, para las próximas preguntas, para que a la traductora no le cueste traducir, tal vez un poco más fuerte.
Vale.
Gracias, doctora Daniela.
Gracias. Entonces ahora vamos a pasar con la doctora.
So now we're going to move to Dr. Wendy Gonzalez. You have the floor, doctor. In the Dominican Republic, we have a similar situation as what Dr. Lemos explained. Producers that tend to be the ones that notify tend to notify through a phone number, through a WhatsApp message, and not through virtual means. So there isn't a virtual platform where they can access the system. There isn't a formal system, but there is a quick notification system through a WhatsApp message, for example, because throughout the different parts of the country, the vets all know each other. Producers, it's a small network, so the producers throughout the area are well known, and they call each other when an emergency arises. But there is opportunity for improvement, of course, being able to create a platform to be able to register these notifications. And we right now manually receive these notifications, but it's a lengthy process. And two, this isn't shared. So we can definitely create a platform that is tied to other ministries and to be able to convey this information to the Ministry of the Environment, for example. And that way we will have a more unified platform to make the system better. And then we can also strengthen this culture of notification among the producers and make it more common. Thank you, Dr. Erica. Would you like to make a comment? Just a brief comment to be able to weave this thread based on the different country focuses. So we all see that there's a need for a system to exist and fluid communication, not only on an internal level through the official national vet reporting systems, but information that will encourage a system that will encourage free communication among producers out in the field. So all countries do require some sort of a platform that will help this type of communication between official services and private producers. So that's the comment. That's the common denominator. We have the same objective. We have the same need, and and we're all implementing it in some way or another. Erica, I want to add something that Dr. Wendy highlighted. and Dr. Lemus as well, how in some of our countries, producers do not feel that this new technology is trustworthy, and they need more of more rapprochement, we can say, perhaps with the producers that are closer to be able to improve communication. So we have to realize that we are in the 21st century, and despite that, we depend on informal systems, as Dr. Wendy emphasizes. They continue to be useful with regard to what's happening in the field. So this draws my attention, and we need to be able to perhaps have a hybrid system. We need to remain in communication with our counterparts, with the public health system and the environment and the Ministry of the Environment, and be able to have a good reporting system with these diseases that are of animal origin. Thank you, Erica. Okay, Rocio, we will continue now with the next question. We're going to again go in the same order, beginning with Christian. So how do your institutions promote notification through with the private sector? So larger, smaller producers, backyard producers, and private producers. So how does your government encourage this type of communication? So this is the procedure in Ecuador. So we have a program to eradicate classic African swine fever. So we work together with private producers in this endeavor. Now, the program consists in the following. The private sector execute through the notification system for classic ASF. There's a system in place, and we are able to hold workshops with producers in order to raise awareness among the need to notify any sort of possible outbreak. So the idea is to be able to have more rapprochement with our producers. And we also have a certification program. And the interpreter apologizes that the speaker's audio is cutting off. Now, we also have communication fairs where we're able to speak with informants. And the idea is to raise massive awareness among producers with regard to the need to notify any sort of possible emergency, because this is the first step. Without this type of early communication, these alerts, nothing will be able to be put in place for a national communication system. Okay, we're going to give Dr. Lemos the floor now.
Muchas gracias. Cuando nos consultan cómo se incentiva al sector privado.
So how do we raise awareness among the public sector? I'm going to begin now. We begin with our smaller producers, which I think is a great challenge, perhaps the greatest challenge, especially backyard producers, these smaller producers as well with bovines. We deal with official reporting systems for diseases. So what we do to promote communication systems is just to disclose information and be able to have early epidemiological warning systems in place. And this helps promote or provide incentives for smaller farmers to notify us with regard to any sort of events. And it's important to also mention clinical symptoms that need to be reported, because many times there are different varieties that are unknown. So So an official vet will, a senior vet will go out in the field and try to raise awareness among them. So I'm going to also mention what we do with our larger producers, larger facilities that have more technical know-how or more technological know-how. So official vet services have developed cooperation agreements, technical and financial agreements, and we call them public-private associations. And well, what do we do with this? We strengthen information systems and finding common objectives. And among this is how we notify any sort of symptoms in a very quick fashion to be able to promote poultry farms and other facilities, animal production facilities, to convey any sort of symptoms, especially the poultry and bovine sector. And that's how we tend to strengthen communication systems in these larger areas. So we need to stimulate, however, notification systems in with regard to avian influenza in wild species, particularly, and be able to work more on prevention. That's a shortcoming. So something that we feel has helped is being able to disclose information through all communication media, and they have been our allies, the media, because they've helped us disclose information massively. We also have even audios that we're able to disclose through radio stations. And that way we can work also through our WhatsApp network and reach smaller farmers, smaller producers. A challenge right now that we face is that we deal with the screwworm. And we're able to work with our media to deal with the cattle screwworm issue. And as a result, working with the media has worked very well with the private sector. Thank you. Okay, thank you, doctor. So we're going to now ask Dr. Smiley to share.
Thank you very much, Erica. Again, with our large farms and our private sector veterinarians, we don't tend to have a problem. Our private veterinarians are obligated by law to report anything, and if they don't, they may lose their license to practice. So it's not an issue. But I agree with Dr. Gomez that the small farmer is a real issue. Even trying to find out, we have no idea how many there are and where they are. So, and they often are not part of provincial organizations. But we tend to, in the event of an outbreak, and even before that, we post on social media, we provide information on our internal websites and external websites. We increase awareness through meetings with producer associations and the veterinary community, their organizations. And then we provide radio and newspaper and television interviews. And to try to reach out to some of the small producers, even at the feed stores, we will post news releases or posters indicating that the disease is there, that they have to provide some biosecurity, those kinds of things, and where to go for extra information, because they're not always in tune with the larger groups. And we have reached out to some of the small breed organizations, posted on Facebook. So we've made tremendous efforts to reach out to that small community, or maybe it's a large community of small producers, because they are hard to reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smiley, for your comments. We're going to ask Dr. Pacheco now from Brazil to take the floor. Doctor. I just wanted to know, Rocio, if my volume improved. And the interpreter states that. it has improved. It has improved.
Sí, que la traductora nos indique.
The interpreter states that the audio is excellent now. Okay, go ahead. So I just wanted to say that we face the same issue that Canada states. We have a huge number of smaller producers, and we have official, notification systems for the larger producers that are mandatory. But we have to raise awareness among responsible reporting. And so right now, what we do is use our system, our online system, to be able to report any sort of symptoms. And luckily, our system is pretty well known, this national reporting system. So the larger producers do report symptoms on our online system, but the smaller producers do not tend to be backyard producers. They are smaller producers, but these smaller producers that are larger than a backyard producer do have limitations in their reporting systems because of this lack of overall awareness. So it's always a challenge. So we take advantage of all opportunities to raise awareness through private veterinary services, through especially with ASF, through hunters. We try to reach out to these broader associations that aren't necessarily veterinary associations and just raise awareness about symptoms tied to avian flu and African swine fever. So another issue that we have that tends to enhance communication or stimulate that is is emphasizing on transparent reporting, especially because the idea is to not discourage transparent notification and just being able to require that producers to submit mandatory documents. So these mandatory documents are mandatory for smaller producers, and we're trying to stimulate reporting through submittal of these mandatory documents, even among smaller farmers. Okay, thank you, doctor. Okay, so we're going to now ask Dr. Wendy to comment. So in the Dominican Republic, it's very, the way that we report is very different. The smaller farmers, on the contrary, do report. They are the ones that are more willing to notify any symptoms because they don't want their animals to die in the event of ASF or African swine flu. They are the ones that tend to notify more. And I think this is the situation that has that we've garnered through a program in place for the past 10 years. We call it the Sanitary Defense Program. And senior vets tend to have workshops with the rural producers. They speak about the different epidemiological diseases, and there's more of an awareness that's been in place for the past 10 years because of our conscious effort to raise awareness. So for the past 10 years, we've been very successful at this, given the fact that we've endeavored to work with these smaller farmers, since there's so many of them in the country. But we're having problems with the larger producers. The larger producers tend to be more reticent in notifying problems or symptoms. They take longer to report things. When they report, it's almost too late. So we're dealing with a greater rapprochement system with these larger producers through meetings, through reaching out directly to them, through these broader agreements, and trying to stimulate reporting. So that's how we have worked. But small producers are no problem in the Dominican Republic.
Gracias, doctora González.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Rocío, adelante con la siguiente pregunta.
Rocio, the next question, please.
Más gracias. La
Okay,
siguiente
thank you. The
pregunta,
next question
está también dirigida a todos.
is also aimed at everyone, and it says,
Transcurre
how
sobre
long
la notificación de una sospecha a los
elapses,
servicios veterinarios
or
de su
what is the
país.
time that elapses between any symptoms that are suspected among the vets in your country, the time that this is suspected, and the time that it is actually
¿Se
reported?
entendió la
Did you understand the question? So basically, from the time that symptoms are noted and the times that symptoms are reported, how much time elapses? Okay. So when an expert when he learns or she learns about a disease that is reported through any system, our internal procedures then respond to this notification within 24 hours. So independent of whatever day of the week it is. So with avian flu, since it's decreed as an emergency in the country, so notifications can arrive at any time, any day. So our lab has to immediately respond to this notification. So that's what we've been working hard at. We work 24/7 to be able to obtain results and respond. So for mandatory reporting, for example, ASF or PPA, that's how we respond. So we have 24 hours to respond, our labs, that is. So we tend to provide a result in 24 hours. So epidemiological epidemiological investigation will take some time, however. Zoonotic diseases take some time to be able to, confirm. But for ASF, for specific zoonotical diseases, some are shorter to respond to, but avian flu also takes longer to complete with regard to the epidemiological response, because disinfection of the facility is required, and that takes longer to complete the epidemiological investigation. But we do respond in 24 hours because it is mandatory. Since we are ISO certified, response times are also taken into account to be able to be certified by ISO. So we take this very seriously. Okay, thank you, Christian. Now we're going to ask Dr. Josue Gomez to respond. Thank you, Doctor. Okay, we face a similar situation with regards to the time in which we are able to report a suspicious event or respond to a suspicious event that is reported and complete the and respond to that, and then complete the epidemiological investigation. We tend to respond very quickly with regard to this 24 hours. And when we do have reports made during weekends, we do have someone that's on call to respond to these weekend reports, depending on the seriousness of the case. So with regard to epidemiological research or investigation, this taking data, looking at how serious the event is, and the number of facilities that are impacted, the number of animals affected. This is all information that we also consider with regard to this information. And another important factor is that notification also involves sampling to be able to diagnose information or diseases that are officially, we could say, under surveillance and that need to be controlled. So we tend to work very rapidly at our labs because it's an official, disease or an official report that's being made or notification. So we are closely linked, or we closely work together with our labs 24/7, we can say. And I remember our labs taking samples at 1, 2 a.m. to be able to provide a timely result. But completing the notification and closing the case truly depends on the epidemiological results of the disease, the varieties. For a bovine TB, for example, that can take a year. That takes a year because constant sampling has to be done to be able to reduce the load of animals in the herd that are affected. For wild avian flu, for example, if an animal is found to be infected, it might only take 24 hours or 28 days. So that takes longer, but these are the time frames that we work with. But notification in itself, reporting to or being able to respond to the report or notification is immediate.
Muchas gracias, doctor. Bueno, ahora pasamos con Tom. Adelante, Tom.
Thank you very much, Rocio. We're probably the same as Christian has detailed. Our staff are out of the office very, very quickly. Even on weekends, they'll respond quickly. And especially if there's a notification from a veterinarian where we have, they think there's a high risk of the actual clinical disease. Our labs turn around these samples. If it is a confirmatory negative or low risk sample, they work 5 days a week during normal hours. If it's a high risk submission, they're 24/7, the same as Christian. We do get very good compliance with the reporting because anything we order destroyed, we pay compensation for. So it's the compensation that drives a lot of this reporting of our issues. The time lapse for the epidemiological investigation, that is really dependent on the number and the tracing that has to be done. So sometimes it can be very, very involved and sometimes it can be very, very easy. But on average, throughout the avian influenza outbreak, the time frame from diagnosis till destruction and disposal was about 4 days. On average. We had some issues with, we tend to use a lot of carbon dioxide gassing of our large farms. And at times we had difficulties obtaining carbon dioxide. So the odd time they were delayed, but in the majority of cases, we had very, very quick response and destruction and disposal of these animals. So thank you very much. That's it.
Gracias, Tom. Bueno, vamos con...
Thank you very much, Tom. Let's go to Daniela. As I had said before, in the case of a notification, when we register this in the national system, regardless of which day that notification was received, and be it over the phone or through the system, the veterinary service responsible for that part and the rest of the agencies will be able to identify the way to address those emergencies within 12 hours, any day of the week. Of course, regardless of who is responsible, it will take a period of 12 hours. And of course, depending on the clinical investigation that is done, the suspicion can be either ruled out immediately, or the samples, if the laboratory confirms, the appropriate measures are put into place. And of course, there's a consideration and an identification of the facility and what is the epidemiological link between that establishment and others. We have the system for CSF and ASF, and we also have it for avian influenza. We also have certain cases where the collection of the samples involves about 48 hours between the collection of the sample and once it is taken to the lab, they have 24 hours for the result. So the result comes in very quickly, unless it is necessary to do a retest or additional tests. Our time average is short from the perspective of, or as a whole, because it's 6 days. Sometimes more time is necessary when we have maybe domestic birds or when there is a depopulation required. But overall and in general, we've had cases with wild birds, and specifically the diagnosis of that bird, which was maybe found dead, and the samples were taken once the animal was already dead, makes it very variable. Yes, depends on the disease, depends on the measure, but we do have that 12-hour window to be able to have that result from the lab. Thank you very much. And now let's go with Dr. Wendy Gonzalez. I think it will be quite repetitive because the processes seem to be quite standardized in the different countries. But in our case, since we've had these ASF outbreaks, ASF has taught us so much, and it's shown so many of our weaknesses and so many of our strengths as well. We immediately receive a notification for avian diseases, but also swine diseases. So within 24 hours, our technicians are in the field dealing with the case. The lab is on the lookout for the samples that will be sent. The field officers communicate directly with the lab and say, we're going to take samples of this species and we are taking it now. So wait for us and be on the lookout. So they tell them the number of samples, and that's how they're dealing with that. The results are received within 24 hours to diagnose any swine disease. Like I said, we're working with CSF and ASF for both. And working with influenza as well for avian influenza, and it's the same type of time lapses, quite a short period, depending on the test that is being performed. For data collection, that will depend on the level of access they have to the information and how large the problem is. And also the fact that they have the tools, of course, to collect the information. So it depends how long it takes for them to do that whole itinerary. Depending, if we think of an average, I would say 2 to 3 days for the information. But the first part, which is a notification and addressing that notification, is usually handled within 24 hours at this point. The case is closed at different moments, and it depends a lot on how large the farm is and the type of results and obviously the disease. Thank you very much, with Dr. Gonzalez. Let's move on to the next question of this section. The question is the following, same order. How much time elapses between the confirmation of a notifiable disease and its reporting to WOAH? Thank you, Erica. I think that we will have very short time to answer this. by rule of the WAH, it's 24 hours, so we have to comply with that. 24 hours is the quick answer. That's true. That's true, Christian. Josue? Dr. Lemus, go ahead. Thank you. Same thing. When it's a notifiable disease, before the WOAH, it is within 24 hours. But it's important to mention one thing. The World Organization of Animal Health, through its information system for animal health, the WAHIS system, has a verification process. And we send a report to the WOAH, and they do a validation process. So it does take some time before the report is published, and so that there's this verification period, and also sometimes there's additional information that was required. So there is a sort of a back and forth. So the time until the report is published can be longer, yes, 48 to 72 hours, yes, after the confirmation of a case of a notifiable disease. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Smiley.
Thank you. Christian and Dr. Gomez are exactly right. It's normally the notifications are within the 24-hour window from confirmation. However, at times it can take a little bit longer depending on, for example, for findings in unusual species. We had some situations where we found SARS-CoV-2 in deer. And so, but from the time that was sampled, because it's not normally under our purview, and we did the samples, ran the samples, and then had to communicate with WOA on how to submit these results and whether they wanted them submitted. And so at times it can take a little bit longer. I think some of the findings that we had for avian influenza in raccoons, foxes, some of the other unusual species, aquatic mammals, took a little bit longer as well. But normally for the known species that these diseases occur, it's 24 hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important, Tom, to know that. Thank you very much. Okay, I think next is Daniela. Go ahead. Thank you. So with respect to the time lapse, all my colleagues have mentioned the 24-hour window, but two clarifications. We have a notification, and when we have an immediate notification, then we create a weekly report. These weekly reports are a way to support and to follow up on what is happening. For example, what was happening with avian influenza. It's really astonishing the speed at which the WOA validates the reports, even with species that are not that frequent. So with that amount of wild animals that exist. So I think that we are quick when it's these species, and we validate those reports quite quickly. And that has come as a surprise, especially considering the time difference sometimes that there is between countries. So I think that they have a very strong workforce to deal with that demand from so many countries.
Muchas gracias. Seguiría la doctora Wendy.
Thank you very much. Wendy? I really don't know what else to add, because since the time is standardized and all the clarifications have been made, we do have 24 hours to notify. For countries that do not have a diagnosis for many diseases, of mandatory notification diseases, we receive the diagnosis immediately, and then we do the notification. So you receive the positive diagnosis, only then you do the notification to the WOA. And that depends on when you take the sample and when you receive the diagnosis. But immediately after you receive the diagnosis, it's 24 hours. Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that since we have Dr. Katia Martinez here from WOA, maybe she can make a recap or comment on something. Dr. Martinez? At this point, as everyone in the panel has said, it is very important to respect that window of 24 hours for notifiable diseases. But there are conditioning factors, of course, depending on the type of disease that we're detecting in the country. And it is those first 24 hours after the diagnosis of the disease, like Wendy said. Suspicions are not usually notified, only when the diagnosis is confirmed. And it is very relevant also to incentivize countries to respond to this evaluation process that Dr. Lemus mentioned, because it's true, the WOA is not going to report immediately all the notifications. They verify the data, they agree with the country on the information, and only then it is published. And so also the document needs to be translated, etc. When the publication is published, it will be in the 3 official languages, English, Spanish, and French. So that's all that I can add to what was said already. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Martinez. So I think that we will refrain from making any comments now because it's time to move on to topic number 4, which is interagency integration. Rocio, I think that you can take it away. First question, is your national reporting system integrated with other public or private agencies or institutions? And how does this work? Christian? Thank you very much, Rocio. As I had mentioned before, we have the CSIS, the Zoosanitary Information System. This system is for official use by the agency. The system is linked to other state institutions, for example, the civil registry, but it does not have an interconnection with other agencies, such as the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Environment. But in this case, it's important to mention that Ecuador has an intergovernmental communication system, which is called KIGUS. And through this system, when we have the need to officially notify something to the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Health or other public institutions on a finding or the presence of a disease, this is done through this particular system. So there's an official letter sent to the minister, and it's signed by our executive director, and we copy, of course, the surveillance official, etc. So we do have in Ecuador this official communication system. And in this official letter, we include this information for this communication. Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you. Next is Dr. Gomez Lemus. Thank you very much. For this, I would like to share with all of you some progress that we have made at the level of our country, which is specifically for those cases of avian influenza that we had at the beginning of the year for wild species, which led us to implement certain mechanisms that we hadn't fully leveraged in the past. Recently, as I've mentioned before, we have a mechanism of cooperation with the private sector, and this involves notification, of course, and it does create and make for the whole integrated notification system, which is integrated with the private sector. As for public sector, what we have done for recent events is to work on the issue of notification with the public services. And we have worked with the Secretariat of Health and with the Ministry of Environment. And they have been key players in working with the issue of notification and to actually bring these notifications to the official services, that is us, focusing on animal health. So that has helped a great deal. This is a mechanism that has been developed and strengthened. And an important point to mention in this experience that we've had is the fact that to identify the action mechanism and what is exactly that needs to be notified to official veterinary services and how this must be notified and what information, of course, how we share it, etc. And another very important topic that we've learned because of the recent emergence of avian influenza is the importance of public information disseminated to the general public. During the outbreaks, having official spokespeople was essential because that kept the information in a timely manner and a concise information that could be shared with the general public. Because the media here in our country like, you know, sensationalism. So we have to be careful with that. And with this integrated notification system, we have worked extensively with professionals, for example, for wild animals, people from NGOs or people from private institutions. In our country, we have an organization of specialists working on wild birds, and they have like a national day where they do bird watching simultaneously in the entire country. And this usually is when the birds are migrating from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. So it gives us very important information regarding the status and the fact that there is no indication of diseases. So that data is shared with us. They notify whether they are seeing any signs or any situation that could require the intervention of the veterinary services. Also important to mention is that within this collaboration and intervention, it's important to tell each sector their level of contribution and support and what they can and cannot do, and to have clear rules. So I think that that's pretty much what I wanted to say. We are working very strongly in this intersectoral intervention and integration, with the One Health approach. And I think this involves notification. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah, I think as Dr. Gomez has said, that Canada's pursuing a One Health approach to a lot of these issues. However, there's not a centralized national reporting system at this current time. However, pursuing this One Health approach for the avian influenza outbreaks, we did bring in individuals from public health and as well as Environment and Climate Change Canada, who are responsible for wildlife, into our National Emergency Operations Center to be part of our response to the avian influenza outbreak. We also involved them very closely in the SARS-CoV-19 outbreak as well in the mink farms that we had in British Columbia. So they were all part of that outbreak. During the avian influenza outbreak, Environment and Climate Change Canada would take samples. We would prioritize samples from in the wildlife from areas where we hadn't discovered avian influenza virus yet. And once we had diagnosed it in a certain region of the province or Canada, then those other additional samples they would send, we would have a lesser priority because we would eventually look at those and then sequence them to see any viral changes occurring across Canada and to see where new incursions were coming from. We did have incursions from both Asia and Europe that were different. And so we would continually modify those to see if there was any horizontal spread. Initially, it was all point source introductions. However, when we got into British Columbia, where there's a huge density of avian or poultry, we did see some lateral spread in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. And now, Daniela. We do not have an integrated system either. We have developed and built the system when there was the outbreak of avian influenza. In that case, the local veterinary services and public health, if there was a confirmation of a disease, they established this with the veracity required for this information and to do these investigations as a result of the outbreak of avian influenza. We have a platform that supports investigations, but it's not open to external consultations. For the diseases that require more investigation, both locally and nationally, we share it with other certain institutions. We share information on some of the investigations. Some of them have not yielded results yet. Some other investigations are ongoing. And then we communicate to the general public a panel with the investigation results at first in Portuguese to have the information of the investigators, and we quickly identify the need to have a reference with other countries and have conversations with other countries. So we ended up creating new mechanisms that are not necessarily automated, but that are working well, especially, like I said, with the case of avian influenza. They created this system. And with the expertise of our environmental colleagues, it wasn't our routine necessarily, but they added quite a bit of important information to surveillance as a whole. Thank you very much. Wendy? We also do not have an integrated platform for the ministries and other agencies. However, we do joint work for different diseases. Since 2007, we have worked with avian influenza in the Dominican Republic and public health as a whole. We have done work with rabies. Whenever there is a case of rabies in rural areas, we notify this with a phone call to the public health services, and that's where they deal with these topics. We have worked with them for brucellosis and tuberculosis also on those farms where there are confirmed cases. We focus on the animal health part and they work on the human part. So as an integrated notification system, no, we do not have one, but we do work in coordination. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's move on to the last question of this section of interagency integration. So the question is, we will go in the same order. Does your country have a regional or trading partner? Go ahead.
Thank you, Erica. I think that as a region, that would definitely be important to strengthen. because there is a regional, given the existence of a regional platform. In Ecuador, when we speak about porcine products, we don't have this sort of experience. But I think that communication, the media is transparent through different means, especially identifying the presence of the disease in the countries. And I think that our official communications through our official social media accounts and websites will also inform the status of the presence of noteworthy diseases. Avian flu is one of these. I think that this is a strength or one of the main arguments to strengthen our communication system on a regional level. But WAHIS truly, I think, fills this communication requirement. It's quick. It's also timely, especially with regard to informing the world. Okay, Dr. Lemus. Okay, I'm going to refer to communicating with our social stakeholders, or sorry, commercial stakeholders. And this is done after lab results are confirmed. And parallel to that, the WOHA is then informed, especially our trade partners. So it's all coordinated. So with regard to regional communication, well, Honduras is a member country. It's also a member of OIRSA. That involves all Central American countries, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. As a region, there isn't a specific system for upholding or for animal health reporting. But when an epidemiological event occurs among any of the member states, the regional office of OIRSA sends out a report to the member countries and the directors of the official veterinarian services so that the country that is experiencing this event can explain the measures it's taking to prevent, control, and eradicate the disease. And it's very important because it allows us to get a firsthand know-how of the event that is occurring among our member countries and to what extent actions are being implemented for prevention and control of this foci, to be able to address prevention measures. So countries truly depend on conveying this information. And this is what we conduct with our trade partners in our region. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lemus. So we're now going to ask Dr. Smiley to comment.
I think the short answer is no. However, with a lot of our, we rely on WOHAS to notify widely a confirmed case. However, with our zoning agreements that we have with a number of our major trading partners, we will give them a heads up based on a presumptive case. And within those zoning arrangements, we have agreements that we will not export any product from the areas around that presumed case. So a presumed case usually has two conditions involved with it. We have clinical signs, plus we have a highly accurate screening test to and that allows us to create a presumed case or a presumptive case. So, and then we will proceed to confirmation. But once we have that presumptive diagnosis, we will notify our major trading partners that we have that presumptive case. So just to give them a heads up. Thank you.
Dr. Daniela. In Brazil, presumptive cases generally occur once the disease has been confirmed, and they are conducted through a specific procedure through the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Health. And then we confirm the case, especially once the case is confirmed. We also notify WOA, and we don't have presumptive cases necessarily, but we do, once it's confirmed, we notify our partners, and but we maintain transparency with our commercial stakeholders. Then once there is immediate confirmation, well, every sort of interaction with regard to the diseases, and for different diseases, zoonotic diseases, with regard to the status, control thereof, and mechanisms in place. So this information is also conveyed to our commercial partners. Okay, thank you, Dr. Daniela. Wendy. We truly depend on WOA. They serve as a tool to provide global communication. We also belong to ORIRSA, as was previously stated, and where a specific case, not a presumptive case, a confirmed case occurs, we proceed to inform the regional office of ORIRSA to conduct the required process. But we use WAHIS for notifications. But since we don't export swine products or poultry, well, we don't notify commercial stakeholders directly. We depend on WAHIS for that. Okay, Dr. Gonzalez, thank you. Okay, Rocio, comments? Okay, so there's this general notification. It seems that on a general level, there is a mechanism that's in place for regional communication through ORIRSA, through CVP, through ACAN, or directly with commercial or trade stakeholders, as was stated. And in Canada, specifically, zonification and presumptive cases are also notified. And then products are not exported from any area where a presumptive case has been notified. I wanted to also emphasize with regard to the first question, how the relationship with the different private and official agencies is required. For example, for avian flu, how this has changed the different mechanisms in place in the different countries, and how they have found a need to reach out to each other and to maintain informed through the public health system, the wildlife and wildlife different wildlife associations and systems, and just the need to be able to work together to maintain a good reporting system. Let's speak now about the WAHI system. Oh, sorry, and the WAHI system, and the fact that it's so important to work at a sub-regional level to provide timely notifications. Well, through this partnership, after ASF, after the ASF onset, and this association that we have now on a more on a broader basis internationally, what we want to do is work through CARIVET, ICA, CARICOM, and other similar organizations, OIRSA, for example, CPP, WOA, FAO. We're all working together to support countries in supporting capacities with these with any needs that arise and allow their activities to be able to be conducted seamlessly. We're also working on specific requirements to maximize resources and prioritize needs to develop specific actions and provide good support systems. So we're working now through partnerships with the quadripartite, and we're including the United Nations Environmental Agency and the quadripartite agencies are also included. For example, I think this is a way to improve coordinations and work together in a directed manner to improve capacities. So I think we're making headway and allowing countries to better structure public-private partnerships through the different sectors that are included in academia and other areas to be able to better deal with these problems. Thank you. Okay, the last set of questions for the panel. It has to do with economic aspects or other incentives. So we're going to go in the same order. The first question says, does your national reporting system contemplate a compensation scheme or other incentive for reporting, and to whom is this directed? Christian? Thank you, Erica. To encourage reporting among producers, we provide coverage for the cost of lab testing. So this testing, these lab testing in general is not paid for by, it's a subsidy, government subsidy. And we also have a compensation system if disease is confirmed. And if depopulation has to occur and animals need to be slaughtered, then the Ministry of Agriculture will take a stand. And what they do is activate mechanisms to provide a compensation and be able to take action to avoid propagation of the disease. But Ecuador's law states that no emergency funds, that emergency funds are activated when an emergency arises. There's an organization in Ecuador called the COE, and that's the COE. It's the Operations Committee, and it includes all public institutions with regards to emergency. The Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, the Treasury, etc. Then funds are activated to provide economic, we can say, compensation, but it's only when a specific emergency arises. But it's the Ministry of Agriculture that has to instigate this. Dr. Gomez. Thank you. So we wanted to mention that we don't have a specific system for compensation for incentivizing notifications, but there are many incentives for producers to report. An important one has been the fact that reporting mechanisms will lead to inspection or visit by a technician to the establishment if a disease is if disease is suspected or animals begin to die in their establishment or disease is suspected. So what we do is provide an epidemiological investigation free of charge. We provide recommendations. We provide recommendations as to how to deal with the disease, vaccinate animals. So I think this is a stimulus for producers, and they feel that they are supported by the ministry. So another important point to make is lab testing.
Son diagnósticos que son los costos son sufragados por los servicios veterinarios, es decir, no, el productor no incurre en ningún costo. Entonces, en esa medida, el productor muchas veces también al ver una situación adversa, decide notificar, obviamente, para revisar y que se le hagan las pruebas correspondientes a sus animales, a su población de animales, y en esa medida identificar si hay alguna enfermedad de control oficial afectando. Entonces, esos serían en primer lugar los mecanismos que de alguna manera incentivan en nuestros productores la notificación a los servicios oficiales, de verdad. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Josué. Ahora sí, adelante, Tom.
Gracias. In Canada, we have no compensation for reporting. However, if there is a disease report, we send out our staff at no charge. There's no charge for...
Perdón, Tom. Creo que no hay traducción simultánea en español. Gracias. Adelante, Tom.
Can you hear me now? Is it translating now? I'm on the English channel.
Sí, adelante.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. There was, in Canada, there is no compensation for reporting. We send out our staff free of charge, and they do the epi investigation, take the samples, which are no charge as well. However, if we find disease and we do order destruction, we do compensate the farmers for the animals that are on the farm. We have worked very, very closely with industry associations to put values on animals. At times, these could be very, very high value animals. We had a case in the early stages of the avian influenza where they were high value turkeys. I think they were close to 6,000 Canadian dollars each, and there were 20,000 animals in a barn. So we had to work very closely with, because we have limits which we can pay for. So we had to work closely with our Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada staff to correctly value these animals. So, but we do get very, very good reporting because of our compensation schemes if we order animals destroyed. Thank you.
Adelante, doctora.
Dr. Daniela Lacerda. Here in Brazil, it's very similar. We don't have a compensation tied to notification. It's only in the event, of confirmed cases, again, if the population is required. compensation can be taken from a federal, a private, or state fund. There are different funding mechanisms to compensate producers in the event of confirmed disease, because the intent is to provide rapid response and prevent higher costs from taking over the affected producer, or from overwhelming the affected producer. So we work similar to how Canada works. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Daniela. Dr. Gonzalez. Well, I have a very similar response, specifically for the fact that there's no compensation for notification, but there is compensation for notification of ASF. For ASF, there is compensation for producers if ASF is confirmed, but there is no compensation scheme for notification thereof. And there's only compensation of ASF, no other epidemiological diseases that are confirmed. Okay, thank you, Wendy. Rocio? Thank you. So there are three challenges that, so this is the last question. Indicate three challenges you have encountered in your country with regard to compensation systems or other types of incentives. Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin by further explaining agency incentives in place. And costs that are covered by the agency upon confirmed cases and that the producer does not pay, and what the state does to be able to deal with, or to establish advanced labs or national level labs, and the required technology in place, reactive agents, for example. So, and the different types of roles we have to assume. So our agency supports producers with regard to depopulation at the facilities. If you look at the costs of biosafety materials that are used, especially with regard to avian flu, these are very high costs that the producer does not assume, that the agency assumes. But implementation doesn't have to do with the quality. That's a challenge. It has to do with starting or being able to put different projects in place to provide compensation for producers and offset these charges, the charges for depopulation. So that's the greatest challenge, to be able to activate these mechanisms, the compensation mechanisms, because it's not, so this is when producers tend to complain, because there's a sort of disorganization with regard to obtaining the actual compensation, although it does exist. And what the compensation covers is depopulation. And once the compensation, if the compensation isn't actually executed in a timely manner, then producers complain. Okay, thank you. Kristen. Josue? Thank you. With regard to challenges to our incentives and our incentive scheme, I wanted to mention that there's this overall lack of trust or mistrust, we can say, with regard to the government, especially when there's diseases that can cause, we can call like media coverage and if, fake news that could perhaps lead to fake news or so mistrust exists with regard to notification of diseases, especially with disease that could involve depopulation. And this could lead or it's a challenge because it discourages notification. We also have sporadic outbreaks with endemic diseases. For example, rabies in ruminants. And in this regard, we may experience late reporting by the producer or inattention, and we won't be able to respond to these reports, especially if many cases are reported. So when this happens, this late reporting, and when producers aren't aware, then it discourages reporting or notification among producers. And a last aspect is that many times producers in some cases, well, this has changed in the past few years. However, in some cases, producers may not be aware of how to notify or does not have access to reporting mechanisms, especially in remote areas. So this could be a challenge to following up cases. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Who has the floor now? Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. Some of the challenges we've had are the changing values in of animals and their worth, and so we try to regularly update our the value for certain different types of animals, different types of birds, especially from broilers to layers to what have you, and because we set specific values for those breeds, and we need to update those continually. Some of the other problems are the outliers that happen where there's high genetic value animals that birds that are producing eggs for vaccines, etc., which are kind of outside the normal, and so they're a lot more difficult to compensate for. The third thing that we have challenges with are the small holdings where the birds or the pet pig are family pets and involved in the family, and so you want to compensate them fairly, and yet they consider those animals to be part of the family. So it's a very, very difficult animal to compensate for when it's your pet. I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Tom. Dr. Daniela. I would say that as a challenge, basically the scope has to do with communication of risk and all of the involved stakeholders know what the disease is, especially among the professional staff, experts. But the challenge is how to be able to get the information out in time, in a timely manner, and kind of being able to notify the network when there's a suspected case. There isn't this established method for notification, and we also see the lack of collaboration among producers when depopulation is required. Especially, they also tend to have this sort of mistrust, and especially there's this emotional tie because to the animal, and especially if they have a high worth. So we deal with these issues still. There are challenges within our, and we're also providing this as an incentive for notification.
Muchas gracias, doctora Wendy. Adelante.
Thank you very much. Wendy, go ahead. In the case of the Dominican Republic, and I speak from our current experience with ASF, our main challenges have been to have a compensation system. Since there wasn't any compensation system before, we had to create one, and having a quick access to funds for compensation was quite a challenge for us because these funds came from, well, it was a complicated process, and we had to create this from scratch. So creating the necessary regulations to access these funds was complex, and even the protocol to define what is compensated and how it is compensated, all of this was quite challenging. That was, I would say, the major challenge that we had. Over time, these things have improved, but this is something that still the Dominican Republic needs to reinforce further. Thank you.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias. Adelante, Erika.
Thank you. Sorry, Erica. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Dr. Gonzalez. And really, thank you so much to all the panelists. That is our last question for this question and answer session. I think, Rocio, I'm not missing any question. That's correct. That was the last one. Just one final comment, I think, with respect to this issue regarding incentives and compensation. This is a very internal issue, which has to do with how each country manages its own financial capacity and how they manage these processes. So it is quite common for notifications not to be compensated, but rather to give the compensation when there is a diagnosis that confirms the presence of the event or the disease in the country. However, it is important to point out, and Honduras mentioned this, and also Brazil and other countries, the basis of the incentive to notify is transparent communication, education of producers. I think that is the main incentive that a producer can have. Why? Because it will affect them directly. It will affect their economy. It will affect their production. So I think that ongoing education has to exist, even though there may be very distant areas, difficult to reach, but official services have to go the extra mile to reach them, I believe. So I think this is a common fight for all countries that have spoken today. Rocio? I agree. I think that regardless of the geographical location, we see a lot of similarities. And in general, all these countries are addressing the issue in a similar fashion with respect to notification, suspicion, epidemiological surveillance for suspicious cases, etc. In some cases, there are specificities. We mentioned like the high genetic value, also sentimental value, which hinders the possibility of putting a price on those animals or making the decision. But when decisions need to be made, even if they are hard, they need to be made and explain this to the general public. I don't know if we can move on to general questions now. Yes, just to mention that we have very little time. I know that some of the panelists are in a hurry and they need to leave soon. There are several questions that we received in the chat, but what we will do is the following. We will focus on 2 questions so that we don't waste this opportunity of asking them here publicly, but also we will be sending these questions directly to the experts. We make that commitment, and maybe if Erica can help me, we can put here in the chat the link to the platform. The platform will have a summary of every webinar that we have organized so far. And in this platform, you can find documents, material on ASF from the different agencies. So we will be including the answers there as well. So Rocio, if you want to ask the first question.
Sí, muchísimas gracias. En
Yes.
este caso,
Thank you.
puede ser un punto que
This
quizá trató alguno de los
this
colegas,
is a question
por
that has
ejemplo,
sort of been addressed, but
¿cuáles serían las herramientas que se
what
utilizan
would be the
para
tools
sensibilizar a los
used
productores
to
a
raise awareness
notificar?
among
Para que
producers
sea
to
importante
motivate them
que
to
el productor
notify? And
reciba
there's a
esta
similar
notificación de
question, which is
forma
what
para
are the main
sensibilizar a los
clinical
médicos
signs
veterinarios
in
americanos.
animals
Me refiero porque ahorita va
to
muy
help
orientada la
raise
receta de la
awareness?
medicina africana.
This is mostly
Vamos
for
a tratar
ASF,
de
I
darles
think.
para
So
no
maybe we can
alguna
ask like a more
influenza o eso.
general question because it's not for influenza or anything else. So maybe someone wants to answer this question. Yes, we leave the floor open for the experts. Whoever wants to start answering, they can go ahead. And others can add. Should we ask it again, maybe? Yes? Okay.
Sí, es una mezcla de
So
dos preguntas.
it's a
Una
mix of 2
sería
questions. One says,
sensibilizar a los
which
productores
tools are used to
mexicanos
raise
de
awareness
una
and
desviación
incentivize producers to
Entonces, la
notify?
otra es que, ¿cuáles
And
serían
the
como
other
los
one is, what would be the main clinical signs and findings in the animals? And we will narrow it down to ASF to raise awareness among veterinarians for this notification. Dr. Gomez and Dr. Smiley. Go ahead, Dr. Gomez, then Dr. Smiley. Thank you very much. I will try to answer the part of what tools are available to raise awareness among producers. One important part is to know what type of communication media are accessible to our producers, so that based on that, we can define what mechanisms we can use to raise awareness. For example, in our case, we have seen that some producers have access to information on social media, but others are probably more prone to receive communication via an in-person talk regarding the disease in question or the notifiable diseases. So the tools to raise awareness, I think, vary a lot, but it's important to use technology as we have it available today to share what the indications are, what the clinical signs, what information is available, and how to notify, and to differentiate this based on each segment of producers so that we can be more targeted as much as possible. And with respect to the findings of these diseases, and if specifically for ASF, I think that in our country, we do not have susceptible species for ASF or CSF, so others can answer that question. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We use all sorts of media to communicate this issue. We've used with the spread to China, I think in 2018, we looked at all sorts of media, Twitter, Facebook, lots of advertising campaigns throughout the country. We did post material on our internal website as well as our external website to make sure that our producers and our staff were aware as well of the avian influenza. We set up a number of forums. We had a forum, an ASF forum, to speak to control measures early on. There is currently one ongoing, the third one. I think Mexico put one on. The US is currently holding one right now as we speak on control measures for African swine fever. So we've worked very closely with the Canadian Pork Council to get the information out. The issues we've had are with the small producers trying to find those. The Canadian Pork Council has been very, very diligent about getting information out to them, both on clinical signs and trade impacts to Canada, because Canada is a swine exporting country. We have looked at our zoning arrangement with the US, and we've modified that. We've modified our export certificates with the US, and we've initiated zoning agreements with our major trading partners. So that's where we've gone with African swine fever. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Wendy.
Thank you very much. Wendy? I would like to answer just about the clinical signs, since I think the tools to raise awareness have already been described. As for clinical signs here in the Dominican Republic, we have the two diseases. We have CSF and ASF, which are very similar, but the clinical signs of these diseases is different. And in ASF, it's much more aggressive. So what we have seen in the animals here in the Dominican Republic, depending on the farm, if it is a farm where there is a full cycle, yes, we have the mothers and we have the different categories, the full cycle. In general, what we tell the producers is they have to be very aware of what happens to the mothers, because that's where the disease mainly hits, yes, causing a high level of miscarriages and abortions, and where the animals will die soon after. So at the beginning of the outbreak, that was the message. Obviously, there are clinical signs that are very specific of the disease, the spots, the deaths that occurred after 3 days after the abortions. So that's where we focus the messages at that point. Currently, the disease has shown certain variations in the clinical signs, where there is a mix of the symptoms with the CSF. But we still see those spots, but some other things that the abortions especially have reduced. And in terms of growth, we see dead animals with sudden death, but the abortions have dwindled. So we focus on them looking for these signs, these red spots, so that they can find a possible suspicion of ASF. That's pretty much the message that we're conveying now. Perfect, thank you. And with what you just described, another question in the chat has been answered, so that's great. Daniela, you had raised your hand, but you lowered it. Do you wish to say anything else, or do you think that it's been sufficiently responded? I think it's been responded, but I would like to mention maybe our experience in Brazil with CSF in the north of the country, with such an area that is not free from the disease. So that communication has to take place there, and the Ministry of Agriculture held a series of conversations and dialogues to reach different audiences through video messages. And this was interesting to show the wide range of signs, because CSF appeared after a long time, and it wasn't the typical hemorrhagic form. It had other signs like conjunctivitis and problems in movement, so it didn't have the typical characteristics. with the hemorrhages. So we have to pay attention to the wide range of signs because it does cause some difficulties in the identification of the signs and symptoms for a proper classification. These are diseases that pose many challenges because sometimes they are not within the classic characteristics. Thank you very much, Doctor. A colleague from Mexico is saying that CSF has nothing classic about it because it's, they have that characteristic. I don't know if Dr. Laureano is listening. He always used to say this. Classical swine fever has nothing classical about it. So that applies a lot to what you just said. And there is one more question that refers to the citizens at large. So I would like to ask all of our participants, just to mention to all participants the fact that GFTATs and all the countries have adopted these campaigns or maybe have their own, like Dr. Smiley mentioned. For some time now, they have organized webinars, congresses, events on African swine fever, and there was communication to avoid the citizens bringing in meat products that could be infected. And sometimes there's not even an infection that has been notified with these mechanisms and that we got to know more about, but that could be bringing in a product that could introduce the risks into our hemisphere and our countries. So for citizens, we also have campaigns, and GFTATs and all the agencies have promoted these efforts, particularly indicating, do not bring in these products. This has been strongly reinforced among all countries. Training for inspectors. Inspectors do a great job. Our colleague inspectors who are in the ports, in the airports, in all border posts and to teach them and to explain what the signs are and what they need to pay attention to, what are the high-risk merchandises and what things they need to pay attention to. Also, in many countries, they have made efforts to improve their inspection systems with dogs sometimes, and this also responds to a question in the chat. And I think that with this, we have answered most of the questions. I think there's one more thing in the chat, but no, it's just a link that the previous speaker mentioned. I don't know if Erica wishes to have another round of questions or if Dr. Martinez. No, I think that we've reached the end of our time together today. So I would like at this point to thank each and every one of the panelists for their effort, for their time, and for the preparation. I know they had a lot of prior preparation with the questions. So I would like to thank them especially for their dedication. I think that this was a very fruitful exchange because we were able to hear from the different approaches used by the different countries regarding notification, get to know what options there are for notification, and always maybe arrive at the same point, which is producer education, for them to know the signs of the disease, and of course, a timely notification, which is so essential. So I think that because I know that, and we all know that how many headaches this could avoid. I don't know if Katia wants to. No closing comments. Okay, so I think that this is the end of our seminar. Thank you so much, and I think that in Mexico there were a lot of people participating. This time Senacica had a high level of participation, so thank you for letting us know. And remember to access our platform because you will have access to all of the recorded webinars, and do share them because we hold these webinars once a month, and the next one will focus on incident command systems in September. So be on the lookout. We will be sharing the dates very soon through the different agencies, and have an excellent week. Thank you very much for your attention.
Un saludo.